This is October 21st, 2014, and we're here at the Brewster Ladies Library with Lawren Cowen. Is that right? Let's just get a little background here. I know you were born on the Cape.
Born in Brewster.
And how far back does your family go? In Brewster or just on the Cape?
Well, my mother was Eastham in 1888. She was born. And my father was born in Hudson, Mass, but he lived most of his life on the Cape.
Did he come here as an adult?
Very young adult.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And what would bring someone to Cape Cod in the early 1900s?
Well, his father married a lady named Hallett, and the same name as at Hallett Funeral, the same family. And so he had a place down here right behind the store. What is that store name? Right next to Ellis Landing Road, what do they call it now? Used to be Packets.
Oh, right. It's one of the Brewster farms.
Down in behind there, he had a house. And he worked in Boston for Noyes Buick.
Oh, my goodness. He was an early commuter.
Yeah, he commuted quite a bit. But my father and his brother Ray, they stayed on the Cape. But he had three other brothers and three sisters. But they all stayed in the city. They'd come to the Cape to visit, but they couldn't wait to get back to the city.
So your father's name was?
George Irving.
George Irving Cowen.
Yeah.
And your mother's name?
Henrietta Brewer.
Brewer. Are there brewers in Eastham? Is that an Eastham name?
That's right, yeah. Because of Lenny Brewer is an accountant.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's your cousin. Okay. And did your mother's family go way back on the Cape?
I think my grandmother, I think she came from Canada. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I can't answer
I
that.
find it interesting myself that people were moving to Cape Cod at a time when I think there was not a lot of business here.
Well, my grandfather started a paint business. Right across Ellis Landing Road, there's a little Cape Cod house. Well, he had a big shop, and I had a picture of that. I should have brought it too. And a big paint shop. And he used to do wagons, and my father was a sign painter, and he used to stripe automobiles in those days, hand stripe them. And even sometimes somebody have it on a refrigerator or something, he'd spray paint it. And I'd go in, when I was a little kid, I'd go in that shop. They never had a mask or anything, but you spray painted this enamel, and it was so thick in here, like fog. He died in the 60s and is some years old. I think that attributed to it. But it was, he did some beautiful work. And they used to take the bumpers off these old cars, the Packards and these big cars, and they'd send them to a place in New Bedford. And all I remember them saying that they'd send them to be re-nickeled. It would be like chrome, you know. And they'd look, when they come back, they'd like brand new. They even scraped under the fenders and the chassis and painted that, hand painted that. Because I remember my brother was older than I was, and my father would make him sit there on a box and had the wheels off and everything and work in there with a brush and gasoline, wash this stuff off and then paint. And I used to laugh at him because I could get away without doing it because I was too little.
But he was small, so he could get in there.
He was small, and he could fit in there, you know. But he still didn't like it because I got off free.
How old was he when he was doing this?
Well, let's see, he was 9 years older than me, so if I was 6, well, he was
15.
14.
My child labor.
Child labor, yeah. And then, of course, when the Depression hit, the business went to heck. People couldn't afford to have their cars painted.
It sounds to me like people were keeping their cars for a long time if they were fixing them up nicely.
Oh yeah. Well, they kept them up.
Yeah.
They were, quite expensive, and they were real cars, old Packards and Pierce Arrows and Studebakers and some of those cars you don't hear about anymore. But
Was it only wealthy people who could have these cars?
Well, for the most part, most everybody else had a Model T, and they were all painted black, and so that wasn't. They if they needed painted, they'd paint them themselves.
Right.
But these were. But the sign painting probably was a big part of the business. My uncle had cabins, Bayview Cabins, off Millstone Road, for many years, and there was a big sign down on a field by Warno.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Camp Wano.
Yeah, he had a big sign there, painted with a advertising the cabins, with a hand pointing to the thing, and it was pretty good. My father did the whole thing, and those type of signs.
And this was your Uncle Ray Cowen.
Yes.
Yeah.
He had the cabins, no son.
Well, was this painting business your father did, was that in connection with his car business that he worked with in Boston, or was that a separate
Well, my
freelance?
father worked in Boston for a while as a mechanic in the Ford Motor Company, I guess it was. But he didn't like it. He wanted to live on the Cape. But my grandfather, he stayed in Boston. He worked, I don't know, he had a pretty good position at a place called Noyes Buick, which was famous for many years. And then, believe it or not, he had an old 30 Buick. I can remember it. He drove to Florida a couple times in that car. And if you can imagine, if you've ever driven to Florida now, with the highways and everything the way they are, right, driving down there then without those highways, all through these little towns, it must have taken a month to get there and get back. And flat tires, they told me, were very common. You'd have to carry a couple spares.
And patch kits.
I beg your pardon?
And patch kits.
Oh yes, patch kits, hand pumps and all. But as I got older, I went to Florida a few times myself. I was able to appreciate it more, the fact that what it must have been like for him to drive down there at that time.
Did he only do this after he was older? Did he ever?
I would think he was probably in his 50s or 60s,
yeah.
Somewhere in there. I wouldn't remember. I never saw much of him. He wasn't a grandfather to us like I am to my grandchildren.
Yes.
It wasn't that closeness.
Well, he lived far away, too.
Yeah, but even when he was here, we never saw him much of him.
Okay.
So we didn't really have a connection.
What about your maternal grandparents? Were they alive?
No.
Okay. So after your father left working for Ford in Boston, he continued doing this painting work on automobiles.
No, then that was when they opened the shop in Brewster.
Oh, okay.
See, my grandfather, with them together, they opened this, and he ran it, and then my grandfather was never there.
Okay.
And
what kind of a store was this?
no, this was a shop.
Oh, shop.
The paint shop.
The paint
Yeah.
shop, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the old wagons, a lot of the old cars had wood bodies.
Yeah.
And they had been varnished, and they needed quite a lot of repairs and maintenance.
Sure.
And that was all part of the business.
So your father was a mechanic. Maybe he worked on cars in other ways.
Well, he didn't, at that point, he'd given up that end
That
of it,
part of it.
and went into more into painting and,
Okay.
that sort of thing. And then a little bit of house painting, trying to get work out in the Depression. That, work became so scarce.
Sure.
And if it wasn't for the garden and the chickens and the shellfish, it would have been pretty hard.
So how many children how many siblings do you have?
6. There's 6 of us.
6 of you.
And 6 in my mother's family, and 6 in our family.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had 5 aunts and uncles on your mother's side.
That's right.
And they all lived down here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. One died quite young with a brain hemorrhage, and the daughter died. The same thing. His daughter. Yeah.
So the 6 of you are living with your parents. Your father's running the shop. There's not a lot of business in the 30s.
That's right.
So where are you in this list of 6?
I'm next to the youngest.
Okay. So you had several
All
older.
4 of them have gone already.
Oh.
I have a younger sister in Osterville.
Yeah.
She's a year and a half younger than I am. She has many health problems, and She says she's going to outlive me, but I don't know. But if it wasn't for, like I said, the shellfish in the gardens and stuff, it would have been pretty hard. As I said in that notes I made, we had a coal fire. We had a coal stove in the kitchen and in the living room. Most of the time we didn't have money to have coal fire going in both. We'd have it just in the kitchen. And my mother, because I was first up in the morning, and sometimes the fire would be out. You'd bank it. I know you might remember what it's called, banking a stove at night. She had to start and clean it out and build a fire all over again. And I'm telling you, a couple of nights, a glass of water beside the bed would freeze. It was so cold.
Yeah.
And she had no washing machine. Everything was washed in a hand, a set tub. No refrigerators. You used to put it in the basement, on the floor in the basement, because that was the coldest place
Didn't
in
have an
the
ice
summer.
box?
And eventually we had an ice box. Yeah. And she made bread almost every day. Cooked.
Really?
Homemade bread, yeah. And baked beans every Saturday night. I got so sick of them. Now I like them again.
Yeah.
But this was a ritual. And many, many days with quahog chowder, a quahog pie, quahog fritters.
So who went shellfishing?
My father used to went shellfishing until I was old enough to do it. And I still did it up until a few years ago. I loved it. And now my granddaughter does it.
All right.
So it was.
So your mother, who ran the garden? Did your mother pretty much run the garden too?
We ran the garden, but she did put all the preserves. We also, in addition to the old coal stove, in the summer we had a kerosene stove with the wicks in it. Some of you folks may be old enough to remember that. And that's what she used for her kettle to boil up to make the preserves.
Yep.
Yeah. And,
hot work in the summer.
And we go out and pick blueberries and beach plums to make jelly, and can the blueberries. We'd have blueberry pie all winter. And as a matter of fact, my friend and I, we'd pick blueberries. We'd sell them outside the road in the summer, make a few dollars.
There were tourists
Now
then.
you'd have to have a permit or you get arrested, you know. You couldn't do that anymore. And and I used to do a lot of caddying at the golf course when I was old enough.
Now, just to put this in context, where's the golf course?
Ocean Edge up up at that Ellis Road up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now the new entrances, of course, are down here, and there was just a 9-hole course there. It started off as a private course with Nickerson Estate.
Oh, really?
Okay, they built that. They had it built.
Oh, I did.
And then the town acquired it, and when I was old enough to start caddying, we'd go up there and caddy. We'd get 45 cents for 9 holes, and 75 cents for 18 holes.
So what? You know what I should have done? I should have said, when were you born?
1928.
Okay. So what year is this that you're getting 45 cents for 9 holes?
In the 30s.
Okay.
Yeah. I was.
You were young.
Yeah. Well, as soon as I was able to put that bag on my shoulder, there were several of us in town that did that. And if you get some of those bags were heavy, big leather bags and all the clothes. And there's one day a gentleman says, "Wait a minute," he said, "young man," he says, "It's got a hot day. I'll help you." He says, he reached in the bag and he pulled out a quart of booze, and he says, "Take this back and put it in my trunk of my car. That'll lighten it up a little for you."
He didn't offer you any, huh?
No. So if we got through with 18 holes, twice around, and we got $1, that was pretty good. That was a quarter.
Twice around?
2 9-hole.
Oh, I see.
Okay. And sometimes if you got lucky, you carry doubles. And you'd make maybe $10, $15, $20 in the summer. Then I'd sit down with a Season Roebuck or Montgomery catalog and send for my school clothes. Make out an order and get a new pair of knickers. So it was interesting, and they didn't know any different at the time because most everybody was in the same boat. I wouldn't want to go through it again for anything. It was, as I look back, it was rough.
Yeah.
And today, when I look around with the kids with their iPhones and stuff, and they don't even go out and play. And we used to create games, and my mother would say in the summertime, we'd go out after breakfast, and she'd say, "Be back by supper time." No idea where we went, and we'd go swimming or tramping in the woods or the beach, and lived on the beach in the summer. But we'd create games, and we were active.
Mm-hmm.
But the kids, I'm afraid, even for health reasons, I'm afraid that eventually it's going to tell on them, because they don't seem to move around much. One kid's here and the other one's there, and they tweet each other.
Yeah, we hear those
and
stories.
It's kind of sad.
Right?
I think it's sad.
Yeah. So at what age were you expected to really be, I'm not talking about when you had to leave school, but at what age were you expected to buy your own school clothes, provide for yourself?
The minute I got caddy and made a few dollars.
Okay.
Yeah,
So what were you, 10 maybe?
Well, started out 10, 11 years old, sure.
Yeah. Oh. And the others in your family, the other children, were as industrious as you?
Yeah, my two older sisters, they married and they moved away, so they weren't any help. And then my next to oldest sister married a fellow in the service, and he was in it for Korea, and they moved all over the world. And so then there was just my sister, my younger sister, and myself, and I was the main support at 16 because my father had a bad heart attack, totally unable to work, and there wasn't any of this handout stuff that you have today. Which is a blessing because if you're really in need. And he had 12 heart attacks in 12 years.
Oh my gosh!
And he finally died. He had one night. And I was only about 18, 19. I was going to be pretty strong. And the doctor had given him some kind of a shot, Demerol or something. And then we didn't have any beds on the first floor. He had to go upstairs to bed. And outdoors to the bathroom. And I had to help him up the stairs. And I literally had to carry him. He was a smaller man. He probably weighed 140 pounds. And he started to fight me on the way up the stairs because of the shot he had. He was out of his head.
Oh.
And he got to the top, almost the top stairs, and I felt something give in my back. And that, I got over it pretty well. And years later, I had a spinal fusion. And I always think that excuse me, I think that caused it. I had a lot of back problems at that point. But I got through that very well, and I did a lot of hard work since and built houses and everything, so I feel very fortunate that way. But it was very lucky that we didn't tumble down the stairs, both of us.
So at 16, you're the main financial support for your family. So your mother still has the garden and the chickens.
We still had that, and she did a little bit of housekeeping where she could walk up the street because she never drove. To a family named Ellis. He had Mr. Ellis, Gilbert Ellis. He had a lot of property. He was not land poor, actually. He didn't have much cash, but he had the foresight. He bought a lot of property and a lot of foreclosed on property. And his grandchildren fared very well from it through his vision.
Did he own the Ellis cottages along Ellis Landing?
Yeah.
That was part of what
he had. He had all that land down there, Ellis cottages, and up off Millstone Road, he had acres and acres of land. And at one time, if I remember correctly, he owned the Orleans Inn, and it was in poor shape, and he bought it for next to nothing. Several houses in town I could name that he bought for little or nothing. And the banks were glad for him to buy them because the property wasn't moving.
So at 16, you're not. What grade in school did you finish?
Ninth. Then after I quit, when I had worked and done all kinds of things, and married. I was 32. I wanted to finish. I took a 4-year correspondence course, did very well in it. Enjoyed it a lot. I got a lot out of it because I wanted to. And then I went to a community college, took a course in psychology, because I worked with juvenile delinquents for 26 years, and it was very helpful.
So let's go back to when you're 16. You're not particularly trained for any career. What kind of work did you find to do?
I worked for a place, Acme Laundry.
Yeah.
It was a big operation. They had 3 big places. And I worked inside, and they had the wash wheels would be big as this table. It was amazing. And then extractors that wring out the clothes like it does in your machines at home now. And then they had delivery trucks on the road. Nobody had wash machine particularly. And a lot of people would send it out. Some would have what they call wet wash, and then it would be dry cleaning.
Yep.
And then we went to Boston for somehow they got the Harvard College and Hotel Manga, North Station, and they had a Blue Bunny in Newton, and one on Brattle Street, several places up there. They contracted for their laundry.
My goodness.
Well, I was 17. You're supposed to be 18, I guess, to drive. I had a good-sized truck. I worked in that job, and I drove all night. I'd start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd pick up all the stuff in Chatham, go off Cape, go all through Boston around, and today I can't find my way around. But
there was less traffic in the middle of the night.
There was no expressway.
Yeah,
Right. All go through all these little towns. I'd be lucky if I get home by 3 o'clock the next morning, and get a little sleep and get ready and go back to work again.
Yeah. Now this is wartime now. When you're doing this, so business
the 40s.
In general is picking up a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little more work around to do.
A little more work. Yeah. And then I worked on the farm for a while in Orleans. It's called Mayo's Duck Farm.
Yeah.
They used to raise 80,000 white Pekin ducks, and they had 100,000 layers. And capons, which a lot of people don't know what capons are today, but they were the best eating bird that you could have.
Would you like to tell our audience what a capon is?
Well, it's a rooster that's been
de-roosted.
Yeah, de-roosted is a good way to put it. And I even helped in that procedure at times when the caponizer would come to the farm.
That was really the name.
The name caponizer, yeah.
All right.
And he'd lay them on the table and pull the wing up and slit them and throw them down. No Novocaine or anything. And so that was interesting. And then they used to ship into Boston 2 or 3 times a week, truckloads of ducks and chickens and stuff. And because all the restaurants on the Cape had all that fresh eggs and chickens and ducks. And then I went learned the trade with a dear friend, Bill Doyle, and became a carpenter for 5 years. I built several houses in town, and I built the only house I didn't build is the one I'm living in Dennis now. But across from Ocean Edge in the Fox Meadow Drive, I built 5 houses in there.
Really?
Yeah. And then I had a chance to go to work for the Department of Youth Service at the State Park for 26 years, and I really enjoyed that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, when were you married?
I was 25 years old. I was married at 52.
And your wife is a nurse, you said?
My wife's a registered nurse. Yeah, she came from, she trained in Roosevelt Hospital in New York.
Oh.
And she moved up here with another gal who looks like her twin. And we still love her and are still in contact with her. And that was in the winter time. They came here in December. And there weren't many, the restaurants and all closed, and there weren't many girls around then, and it got kind of lonesome, and so I lucked out when she arrived.
This nurse came to town.
And so that took me out of circulation.
So where was she, when she came here, where was she living?
Right across from the old Brewster School, the town hall now.
So she rented a room
or
an
her folks
apartment?
bought a house up here.
Oh, her folks bought it.
And had hoped to move up here someday. And she lived there. And I took care of her from then on.
Okay.
And still at it.
Well, now, and you and she have some children?
We have 2 daughters, Diane and Ginny.
Okay.
and 2 grandchildren. And I just got a great-grandchild.
Oh, congratulations. Well, now, when you were raising your family, things were not as tough as they were in the 30s, but Cape Cod was not such a
On
prosperous...
Underpass Road, I bought 7 acres of land up there for, I think, about $800 or $900, and I built a little cabin up there, sort of, 12 feet by 24 feet, with a 6 by 12-foot porch on it, and that's where we lived for a couple of years. Then I built another one, a 2-bedroom cottage next to that. I moved into that one. 2 years later, I put a foundation in for my house. It's still there today.
And where was that? Was that
on Underpass, right where the post office is?
Yeah.
Well, that from the bike trail to the about 400 feet down the road, there's a house, and there's a insurance building in between. But then about 3 years later, after I built the foundation, I remember 1,200 blocks I laid by hand, and I built a house, and that's where we lived for the next 12 years. And then my 2 daughters got ready to go to school. They had told me, the selectman said that the bus would come up there because there were other kids just beyond the other side of the bridge, the underpass.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a big place to turn around. And then they said no, they couldn't do it. The bus was full anyway, they couldn't do it. If you lived within a mile,
right,
you had to walk.
Right.
Well, 2 little girls are going to walk from my house to the Brewster school. My wife was trying to work, and I was working.
Yeah.
And that one of us would have to stay home and transport the kids. So I got mad, sold the place, went down here off Ocean Edge and built 4 or 5 houses in there. I moved from house to house till I went free and clear.
Yes, right. So.
And,
well,
so
tell me, when your mother was doing all the cooking and she's working out of her garden, and what would you have for breakfast, say?
Mostly shredded wheat.
Okay.
Oatmeal.
And was dinner?
Cream of wheat.
Okay. Was dinner?
Occasional eggs.
Yeah. You had chickens.
Yeah.
Dinner was.
It could be anything, depending on how flush we were. We had a lot of Hamburg, which was like 39 cents a pound then, and like I say, shellfish and succotash, anything.
So I was just wondering, I mean, how much meat was available? You could get fish and shellfish, I guess, but.
Not much. We had raised pigs a couple times.
Okay.
Had pigs.
Yeah.
And I go deer hunting.
Yeah.
Quite often I get a deer. And I did quite a lot of hunting, duck hunting, and I'd shoot ducks and geese.
Yeah.
Which of course are like poultry. It was.
Were you a fisherman as well as a shell fisherman?
Yeah, I did a lot of fishing, and I got pictures home now of fish, and I went out there one day in the bay in my little tin boat, and I got 165 pounds of flounder. And we filleted it all out, and we had a fish fry, and had a lot of people in. We had stacks of it. It was a great night. Mm-hmm. And we'd freeze it for the winter.
Was this when you were living with your mother?
This is when I was first married.
First married.
And after when I got married, I did a lot of fishing, and my kids fishing, and they loved it. And then I took my grandkids fishing, and my grandkids still today love it. Matter of fact, my grandson, he went from there into lobstering. He's got 2 boats now. He's got 600 or 700 pots off here in the ocean.
Oh my goodness.
And as a matter of fact, I'm going to have lobster this week. And, and he also had another boat with a friend of his in Hyannis, and they go tuna fishing. And he gets quite a few too. He hasn't got it this year. His partner got 4 the other day. His picture was in the paper.
Wow.
And so he works very hard and loves every minute of it.
So did you have a motorboat? You talked about your little tin boat. Did you have a motorboat to go
I had
fishing?
a little outboard motor.
A little outboard motor.
A little 14-foot aluminum mirror craft. And I went out one day. This is kind of funny. My brother, the only time he ever went fishing with me, he wasn't into it like I was. And I took him out in September right out of Seward Harbor, And we were about 3 feet off the harbor, 300 feet, excuse me. And I saw this, we were fishing for these big mackerel in the fall. They used to come back about that time, going through the Cape. I saw this fin, and I thought it was a tuna. I came up and it went down, and I'd start up and I'd run over there to it. And then he'd go down and it'd pop up over here. The third time I went over, I went up, and he came right up beside the boat. It was a tiger shark, and it was as long as my boat. His head was right at the stern where I was. He looked up at me, and I'm looking at his eyeball there, and the tail was up by my brother. And then he kind of went back down, and I decided we'd go in. My brother said, "I'm never going with you again." And one other time I was talking about sharks. I had my cousin from North Reading down, and he was an avid fisherman, and we fished together quite a lot. And we were out there one day, and we were going from between Bruce and Dennis, going towards Brewster, and I ran out of gas. I had to switch over to the other tank. So when I had to stop and fished over, I looked down, and that was a shark about 10, 12 feet called a blue shark. The tiger is dangerous like the white shark. The blue shark is not dangerous. But then again, my cousin, he was about as frightened as my brother was. For some reason, not that I'm tough, but it didn't seem to bother me as much because I figured that was, pretty harmless. He wasn't going to attack us. So those were two experiences I've had with sharks out there. And the sunfish, with another friend one day, and I was kind of closing my eyes, kind of resting a little bit, and this thing jumped over the boat. That's a big, like a pumpkin seed. I don't know if you're ever familiar with a sunfish or not,
yeah.
But it swims through the water
Right.
kind of like this. And if something scared of something, he went kind of over the bow of a small boat, scared everybody to pieces. Because if he fell in the boat, it could have almost upset it.
Yeah.
But we're out there enough, and you have experiences. So acres and acres of these white dolphins one time breaking the water, and that was some sight. I thought it was a tidal wave coming because it was way in the distance. So I went way offshore, and I didn't usually do until I got close enough to see what they were. I didn't get close to them, but I could see what they were, and they were just going. It was quite a sight to see them.
Oh, how beautiful!
And then there's so many stories. I'm jumping around a little bit, but and the fish weirs out here, I don't know whether any of you folks ever saw them or not, but they're in this book here too. I worked there a little bit when I was very young with Warren Burgess, another young man, and myself, and we'd go out there and tend those traps and fish get those mackerel and seine them around and take big dip nets and put them in the boat, the dories. And I wasn't there at that time, but he used to go off on a horse and wagon sometimes too.
Right.
And this one time, they called it like a little tidal wave. The water came in so fast. The guy on the horse got his foot tangled in the weir, the seine, and the guy ran for shore, and the horse couldn't get out. He drowned. And I didn't see this, but this is my father's stories.
Did the wagons have like extra wide tires?
Not particularly,
or,
about so wide. They went.
What is that, 6 inches
maybe? Yeah, probably. They had a little wider wheels than normal, I guess.
And did the horses have anything special to help them walk across the wet sand?
No. They were just big, powerful old work horses. And I guess one time, I didn't see them, but this man, Gilbert Ellis, who was quite notable in town, I think he had what they call a pair of oxen. And they were, really hard workers. They were neutered and stuff just for that kind of work. And they used to do the same thing. But several people had fish weirs out there. Yeah. Some people call them fish traps, but the weirs was.
So all up and down the bay in Brewster,
Yeah, they were. Well, there was some off Chatham too.
Off Chatham.
Yeah.
Oh, off Chatham.
Yeah, some a little deeper water.
Yeah.
Yeah. The tide didn't go down like it did here. It was deeper, and it was a little different the procedure when they got it.
So if I just walked out to a landing in Brewster, I'd be pretty likely to see a fish weir somewhere along
Not today.
Not today, but I mean then.
Yeah. Then, oh sure, yeah. Like I say, you refer to that book.
Yeah.
And there was Warren Burge had 3 down East Brewster. And a man, I think his name was Clint Eldridge. He had a couple off the Brewster,
right,
to the west.
Farther in the west, yeah.
Do you go back a ways here? Or?
No, not as much as I'd like. Wish I had a long family here.
Okay. Family.
I mean, I wish I could
say. Name. What was the family name? Was anybody I would remember?
No.
Oh, okay.
I didn't. My family's not from here. I wish it were.
I see. Okay.
So I'm trying to get sort of a comparison to the way it was when you were growing up and when, say, your daughters were growing up. So, did you go to the Brewster School?
Yes.
The one that is now the town hall?
That's right. Yeah.
And how many grades were in the school then?
There was 8. There was 2 in each classroom. Okay. There were 4 rooms, there were 2 in each one.
And then where would you go to high school if you had gone?
Lanes. I
Okay.
went there one year. Yeah.
Okay.
In the school one day we had a young man there that Mrs. Parker used to take foster children in, and we had a boy in our class. He was a big guy. He'd been kept back to a few years because he didn't do too well. And Mr. Burris, Ozzie Burris, I don't think there's anybody here would remember that name probably, but he was the principal, and he also taught. Here this one day he says, we call this kid Frankenstein. I don't know why we just. He was just a little different, and the kids would be kids. And one day he was acting up a little bit, and Ozzie Burris, he took his glasses off, and he says, I can't recall the kid's name just now, but he says, so the desk weren't bolted to the floor. There was a seat and a desk, and they were all in a metal frame, so you could move them around if you wanted to. You pick up your desk and take it in my office, he says, and I'll be right in. The kid stood up and he says to Ozzie Burris, the principal, you help me, what the hell do you think I am, Tarzan? And that's when they used to have a rattan in the top drawer. You ever hear of that in school?
I can guess.
He went in there and the door closed, and all those kids were standing there, or sitting there, and we heard thrashing around in there, and then we couldn't wait for lunchtime to get downstairs in the men's room to wash up for lunch, the boys' room. And we said, Tarzan, what happened? No, we call him Tarzan, I'm sorry. And show us your hand. There was all red welts, you know. He said, Mr. Burris come at me with that rattan, he says, and told me to put my hand out. He said, I pulled my hand out back and he fell over the desk. And that made him even madder. So he washed up and he was laughing and it didn't seem to bother him. But of course today they'd have put Mr. Burris in jail.
Yeah, right.
But I want to tell you, it had a ripple effect. Kids behaved very well. And he was a good man. He wasn't a mean guy, but he had discipline and said, you can't get your attention, you can't teach anything.
He was there for a long time.
There for a long time, yeah. And he was well respected, and he was a nice guy.
So did you have a school bus to get to school?
Oh, or, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a bus of some kind that would
I think it was a Model A, the first bus. It was fine. That's what it was at that time. We thought it was great. And I remember one time that Mr. Breyer was driving, and I think he was filling in for someone. So some of the older boys got the idea, instead of seats this way, they had seats on the sides. All got on one side of the bus, started to rock it as we go along. And the poor bus driver, as I think back now, I felt so bad for him. But, kids will be kids, and if he had have gotten up and said, sit down or else, but he didn't. He kind of took it, and I was a little kid at the time, and we were kind of scared. We thought the bus would tip over or something, We never did, of course, but as I talk along, I think of some of these things, and I don't know whether we're sharing with you or not, but at the time I thought it was kind of interesting. So what else do you...
Who were your teachers? Do you remember any teachers' names?
Yeah, Dot Daly.
Really?
She was there.
My goodness.
Yeah. And she was there for many years.
Yeah, she
many
was.
years,
Yeah.
And another gal, Charlotte Motors, and Miss Anderson, and Miss Kelleher, and Lillian Clark, Callahan, her married name, and
You're pretty good.
I'm quite a few of them.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
When I was working in the store, Mert Foster's old store, that's I think in here too. That book.
Now, where was that, Murphy?
That was Foster Square.
Okay.
Well, there was an old store there. I had a little job there too, and I was pretty young. And
Well, what's pretty young?
well, I was 10 maybe.
You really were. Okay.
And I could be useful. And Dot Daly, I was a little older because Skip was just born, his son. And she used to bring him into the store. She'd come for the mail or pick up some soda pop or whatever. And he would head for that candy counter, had a big candy counter, and he'd get in there and he'd fill his pockets, and she couldn't stop him, and he'd run around the store. and then she'd go over to Mrs. Foster and said, I don't know what he took, but here's some money. So, and then I'll tell you one more story about that. I don't want to bore you either, but in the summertime, I'd go in there early in the morning, and there'd be people waiting on the porch that were from the cottages because there weren't any supermarkets around.
Right.
And we first unlocked the door. But when we first go in, she'd say, now check that cereal up there on the top shelf. Real rats in the store. And a rat came in there one night, several times. And he gnawed a hole in the cereal box, and not just in that box, went through and come out the other end. And then one morning we took 6 boxes of cornflakes or something like that off the shelf. And took them down. So she said, put them in that big bag. She says, and her husband's name was Edgar. Now you probably won't believe this, but she said, Edgar will take them up to the house, he'll eat those.
Oh. We don't waste things.
We don't waste things. It actually God's honest truth. And I've told some people that, and they look at me and sure. Another day we were in the morning, and it was smell. We knew right what it was. Well, they had a Coke machine, and it had water in it at that time, and the water circulated, the cold water. And you set the bottles in there, the water would be about this far from the top of the neck. And in the back would be a fan. Well, a rat got in there at night and killed the fan, and it was hot weather, and it began to smell. So she says that night, she says, you can stay, she says, after we close, she said, I need your help. She says, you and Ed, you got to empty that water, move that away from the counter, and get that dead rat out of this. And so we put it back, put the water in. I know this sounds unbelievable.
Meanwhile, people had been buying the sodas all day.
Well, didn't hurt the soda.
No,
it was capped. It was in water.
That's right.
No, didn't hurt them. No.
That's right.
Yeah. And we had mail 3 times a day, morning, noon, and night. It'd be morning mail, and at night in the summer, not much else to do. So a lot of people would walk up to the post office to hang around and visit, wait for the night mail to be sorted.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a ritual and entertainment and chance to meet girls and whatever.
Did they sell ice cream too?
Yes.
So it's mail and ice cream.
I beg your pardon. Yeah.
Mail and ice cream.
Yeah, well, they had all kinds of groceries.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, canned goods, and SSPS was a big.
Yes.
Do you ever remember that name?
Yeah, I do indeed.
That was one of the high quality there. She stocked that because a lot of the people could afford to come here in the summertime and rent. They liked the SSPS goods.
Did you feel when you were growing up, and maybe even when your daughters were growing up, that there were a few rich people and then there was everyone else? Was there that kind of feeling at all?
I beg your pardon?
Were there some people who really had more money than most everybody else?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that was accepted. Well, right over in Nickerson Estate.
Yeah.
That was and then the White House, this side of it was the son, one of the sons that lived there. And the old original one, I think it's pictures in that book, it was a wood one that burned down.
Yes.
Well, my father and his brother were out, there was no trees, so you could see from down back to that little store there, the gas station there near Ellisland Road. Well, they lived down in back there towards the beach, and you could see right across to the ocean edge, the Nickerson Estate.
Uh-huh.
And this one morning they saw smoke over there, and they went running through the fields over there, and they went in. And this guy was a big game hunter too at one time, I think. They told me he had a lot of guns. They went in there and they got a lot of stuff out of there. They saved a lot of the stuff.
Oh my goodness!
And they never got any credit or anything for it, but they did. And it burned down. That's why they built that masonry type building. There was one man, Harris Ware, I don't know how wealthy it. Excuse me, they call it Bonnie Doon House down there. He lived there by himself, and he had this lady, Hattie Chase, used to walk up and get mail for him, and wait on him, clean his house and everything. And he'd buy a loaf of bread in the wintertime most every day to feed to the seagulls.
Goodness.
Because the seagulls, he felt sorry for them, and they probably ate better than he did from all the shellfish. But that was, in those days, a loaf of bread was a loaf of bread. And, that was his. That was impressed us because everybody give away a loaf of bread like that to the seagulls. It didn't happen. I don't remember many other people. Sea Pine School was a biggie one time.
Yeah.
It was 3 times bigger than it is now. It burned down.
Another big fire.
Yeah, it was a big fire.
Were you around for that?
I was. I was about 8 or 9, and I remember the shingles were still on fire, like that would rise up from the heat of that thing, and they floated. The wind was blowing east, and they floated right down near our house.
Oh,
and they set out a lot of grass fires here and there, spotted grass fires. And that was they had a fire engine up at the town that had a whole 300 gallons, I guess, of water, and that was empty in about a few minutes. And one time there was a fire down back of Dot Daly's house in a trailer, and 3 or 4 had just volunteer firemen, and they showed up at the fire. They looked at each other. Who the hell brought the fire truck? Nobody stopped to pick up the fire truck. By the time, of course, they got that, the trailer had all burned up.
That's why we're not all volunteer anymore.
That's part of it, yeah.
So when you were raising your own family, you weren't living a subsistence kind of lifestyle.
Oh no.
You and your wife both had jobs.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, we both worked. We didn't live high, but as we got a little older, we took trips. We've been to Bermuda 2 or 3 times. We've been to all over Europe, Italy, and went to, my wife's folks came from Sweden. We went to Sweden, Norway, and so when we got to a point where we did some traveling, and we went to West Coast, went to Yellowstone, and saw the redwoods, and I mean, I made up for some of the stuff that I wasn't able to do when I was a kid growing up.
So it's a completely different possible way of living, wasn't it?
Oh my. So I think I appreciated those things more, though. When I was out there, saw those sequoias and redwood, I was like a child standing there looking up those things. I was just in awe. It was just so beautiful. I never ever thought in my lifetime I'd get to see something like that.
Especially because
And
when
the
you were...
buffalo, one place we drove about 60 miles out of the way just to see this range where there were buffalo. And they could look out and there was a tree, you didn't see a house, a car, you saw nothing but a herd of buffalo. And it made you think back, to 100 years ago or something. And no, we've managed to do quite a bit. I feel blessed that way.
Yeah. So you've been a fisherman, a shell fisherman, a stock boy,
A stock boy, a builder.
a carpenter, a builder,
Yeah,
and then you spent most of your time working with the state in Nickerson Park.
That was my career, so to speak, mainly. And I went back to work 3 times after I retired. I worked in the hardware store, True Value, weekends. The Stop and Shop tried to get me to be a bag boy. I just like to keep busy.
Well, tell me about your work in Nickerson. Tell me what that job was.
Well, that was interesting. We had about 20 boys, all adjudicated delinquents, and we did work in the forest. And we planted redwoods and white pines, and I have another picture at home. We used to have them cut the wood, and the campers bought this wood in the summertime for the campfires. I have a picture at home, sawed and split wood in stove lengths, and a big pile, 70 cords, if you can imagine. And I got the boys, about 8 of them, stand there with an axe on their shoulder and stand there. Couldn't get a close-up of them because we weren't allowed to take pictures of them close-up.
Right.
But standing in front of that wood pile, they was as proud of it as anything. And then we did that for a few years, and then we started a program called Outward Bound.
Yeah.
Or Homeward, we call it Homeward Bound. Outward Bound is throughout the country. They'll have programs. It's styled after that. And we hired some young college guys and to work with these kids, and because this was a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week deal, and they go for this. It was a 26-day course, and if they got through there successfully, we parole them, and they went out climbing, rock climbing, and hiking, and pardon me, and we had 2 boats built in Maine. They're called sail and pull boats. They're about 20-something feet long. They had 2 sails and oars they could row. And we had them over in the Crow's Pond in Chatham. They used to go over, and they would row over in Pleasant Bay, that area. Yeah, a lot of, from the river in Orleans all the way to Chatham, there's a lot of water that they could work. They didn't go out in the ocean with them at that time. They weren't prepared for that. And they'd go camping on the beach out on the point down there. I forget what it's called now. That was quite an experience. It was tough because they'd hike in the power lines mainly, and
Carrying packs too.
Carrying packs, yeah, and they're just like those kids in the Outward Bound program that people pay pretty good money to send those boys to. Once in a while we'd have runaways, and we'd be out hunting those down. Got to know pretty well where to look for them after a while. One time I went up to Boston, picked up 5, and from this hall, this lockup we had up there, and so coming back and in the camp, usually 2 of us would go, and they'd never been on the Cape, of course, and never been in the woods. We started to go up, and it's about 1.5 miles into the woods going up there, which I also used to plow in the wintertime. And I said to the boys going in, I said, now, remember, if you want to run away, better not do it at night because there's bears in these woods. And I said, they're out at night feeding. We never lost a kid at night. We lose in the daytime now and then, we lose one, but not at night.
Now the boys got to choose to come here, didn't they?
Oh no,
Oh, I thought they had a choice.
They were picked by some of the people in the facility. They thought they might be good. What's the word I want for
Good candidates.
good candidates for the. When we first opened, there was a place called Shirley, and boys' school, and then we had another place in Westboro. I don't think they were happy that we were open. Now they wanted to keep them all there, I think. So I think when we started out, they picked the worst they had and gave them to us. And we were all except one man that came from Shirley. He was a counselor up there. We were all new at this, and we had some pretty tough kids. And then we also got a few from Bridgewater Institute for Juvenile Guidance there. That was a lockup. The kids that committed murder and some pretty rough stuff. And sometimes no one knew it, but we got a couple of those kids because they had political connections, and they'd get it because this was like a country club, and they would get shipped down to us. And however, we never had any really bad incidents. We got through it.
Did you follow up with any of these boys?
Once in a while, I'd hear from one. They'd stop, and a couple of them. One particular boy, nice kid. His folks had a cemetery monument place over in Hyannis. Forget his last name for a minute. I'll think of it. And I took him out fishing with me 2 or 3 times in the boat. And one time we was out there, and there was some people that came in foggy, and the people lost out there in the flats. We'd travel a little bit, and I could hear them howling for help. And to go in that general direction, I was trying to find them. Gosh, they got further and further away, the boys, and I was really scared because nothing I could do, and I wanted to help. And so eventually I just didn't hear anything more. And I know how the tide can come out there and trap you. So on the way back, we stopped the police. We had one police, McGlass and a chief, and the man on the desk there, and asked about these people. He said, "We got them. They're okay." There were people, excuse me, on the beach that heard them, and they formed a kind of a chain, so they kind of just were in view of each other, and they got them in. And I was so relieved because I thought something had happened to them. But yes, once in a great while, some of these kids, you get attached to them.
I just wonder if you have any idea how much effect this experience had. Hard to know.
I don't know how to answer that. But the ones that I do recall had come down back once in a while to visit. They were happy. Some, of course, went on to bigger and better things.
Yeah.
And one kid in particular said he wanted to be committed to jail because he wanted to learn how to be a real good criminal. And I think that's where he probably is today. But they came back, some of them, and it was like seeing family members.
Yeah,
because we
nice.
spent so much time with them. We ate with them, and we were with them every day. And
the camp was sort of following in the tradition of the CCC. That was like a CCC camp
it was
in
still
Nickerson.
started kind of that way because the CC camp, they started most of the white pine trees, well, not most of them, some of them you saw up there, and the roads and stuff, the CCs were responsible for helping to build those. And then we kind of picked up where they left off at that time.
Now, did you know some of the people at the CCC camp?
Yeah, only because came up they'd be walking up the street up to the post office to get cigarettes or something, and we got acquainted with them, and because I had two sisters and older sisters, and we got to know that be 2 or 3 of them would come by the house, and we used to play cards at the kitchen table Sunday nights. My mother would make call a Boston cream pie and coffee or something, and they were. It was like a home away from home, and there was they got like family too. So we did get acquainted with a few of them. Yeah.
How old were the CCC guys? Were they young?
Well, they were like these kids.
They were really like old
Yeah,
teenagers.
no, they were young.
Really?
As a matter of fact, one guy that worked with us, Rolly Gallant, he was in the CCCs at one point in time. He was one of the last ones, and went on to work, and then he got a chance to work with us, and he came to work at the camp with us. So that was
Wow,
very unusual.
That's nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice connection.
Yeah.
Well, you made all these notes, which I greatly appreciate. Let me just follow up on a couple of things you said here, because it's. Tell me about water when you were growing up. Water for the house.
It was actually as I said it. We had I got about 5 more minutes. My wife's over working on the blood bank. I got
Okay, good.
And we had an old gasoline pump in the pump house, and we'd have to go out and fire that up. And then one of us, my brother and I, we'd have to go up in the attic. We had a big tank up there with a big piece of cardboard or something over it. It was open at the top. And we'd have to watch it until they got up a certain height, and then holler out the window to shut the pump off.
Now it's coming from the well.
Coming from the well. Oh, yeah. Well water. It's so much better than what I'm drinking today. But anyway, if we didn't, it would flow over. It'd flood right down through the ceiling.
So this was a great improvement over the hand pump in the kitchen sink.
Well, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
Yeah, my grandmother in East Ham did, but we
Yep.
didn't have that. But it was like an upgrade. But in the winter, if it was really cold, we couldn't start the pump because the frost in the thing would probably break the rods. And like I say, we had an outhouse, and that going out at the outhouse, and it's about 10 degrees at night was interesting things. We weren't alone; many people were in the same boat.
Sure.
And my mother made a lot of clothing. She used to make pillowcases. Used to have grain bags at that time, and they had designs and flowers or something on them. She made pillowcases out of them. And that sewing machine was a hand foot pedal. That was humming all the time. And I don't know. There's more and more stories, but I just don't have time.
All right, we've got a couple minutes.
Go ahead.
Tell me about the police department.
All right. Well, we had the chairman of the selectmen was the chief of police at that time. He acted as the chief of police. And,
whoever was chair of the
that's
selectmen.
right.
Okay.
And Bobby Foster was the chief at this one time, and he was a real old capey, and he had a wood stove, and he never modernized much, and he always burned wood. I had this old car, I meant to take a picture of that, all stripped down with just 2 seats on it that I used to use it running down, and it wasn't registered or anything. I'd race down on the beach at low tide, another kid had one, and then I'd bring it up in the backyard. I had a big 2-foot saw with a big belt, and I'd lift up the hind wheel and put a cement block under the axle, put that belt on there, put it on the saw, start the engine, put it in gear, and pull the hand throttle out and get it. I could tell by the sound of the saws, it was singing about right. You saw wood with it. And Bobby said one day, "Geez," he says, "Lawren, bring that up the house." He said, "I got some wood I want you to saw and for me." And I said, "For I can't. It's not registered or anything." "That's all right. I'm the chief of police." He said, "I'm not going to bother you." So I went up. I went up there and sawed wood with Bobby. And,
Now McGlashan was I thought was McGlashan after this
McGlashan
time?
came along. He moved down here from Taunton, and I got acquainted with him. And then they wanted to have a constable, so he ran for constable, and I went out and campaigned for him and got him elected. Little by little, then we established a police department. We got specials, and I was one of the specials. And like I said, I'm the only one alive that was a special, 6 of us. And I worked as a special police officer in the summer, and for, I don't know, 3-4 years.
Were you paid for this? You were paid something?
$1.35 an hour.
All right. But McGlashan
Big
was
bucks.
the only full-time.
Yep.
Okay.
And then Saturday night, a fellow named Ernie Gage, I don't know if you've been around.
I knew Ernie.
Did you know Ernie?
Yeah.
Well, he was a dear friend of mine, and I thought the world of Ernie. and we'd switch off. One Saturday night he'd work the Four Aces. Next Saturday night I'd work the Four Aces. We'd be down there as a cop, and they wanted us to stay out in the kitchen and out of the way, you know. But we were there to.
I don't know the Four Aces.
Well, that's the Lorinos down there.
Oh yeah, okay.
That's four. I'm sorry,
Oh,
I take
good.
it for granted, you know. And and then when it was closing that Saturday night, at midnight, we had to shut it down, and then we'd go out in the parking area, make sure nobody was drunk getting in their cars, and we'd switch off. We got $5 for that,
Oh.
and a couple of drinks afterwards. You take off a badge after you close the doors. And one night, it was about midnight. Everything had been pretty peaceful. And I was standing by in the kitchen. All of a sudden, I heard slam, bang, thrash. And I went in there in the dance area, and there was a fight going on. One guy was knocked out on the table, and there was well, I don't know, you knew Rolly Bassett too, probably. You know who he is, the
Yeah.
Ice House. Oh, he was also a good friend of mine. We used to hunt together, and we were the police together. He was a pretty rugged guy, and McGlashan was a big guy. I looked at the front door. They were just coming in the front door. I was never so happy to see anybody in my
Yeah,
life.
right.
At that point, I had a couple buttons ripped off my shirt, and I was trying to control things. And we finally got it under control. But that was other than that, that was a bad night. We had the worst night of my life there. But if we established a police department and paid something at the time, I would probably stayed on that.
Yeah.
And but it didn't. So that's when I got involved with the Department of Youth Service. And,
I'm not sure when the police department really went professional.
well, big time. I can't give you a number right now either. I'd have to think about it.
Because I think when Sabin Lord was chief of police, he was the only other than the specials.
Yeah, we didn't have any full time then. Just
Yeah.
Sabin. Yeah. And Sabin would have done it for nothing. He loved it.
Well, I think we've used up your time.
I think that no, I'm glad to do it, and I keep thinking of things. I could go on, but I don't want to bore you either.
This has been wonderful.
But it's been interesting, and I'm pleased that at my age that I can remember so much.
You have a wonderful memory.
Yeah, I'm pretty lucky.